and recording will begin. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. In today's webinar, we will be talking about standards 1.26, 1.27, 8.5 and 8.6, which is basically transitioning from superseded training products and how to keep up to date and comply with all the other legislation that you're required to comply with, because there's a huge range of legislation that we need to comply with that is not just the standards for RTOs. So we'll be having a look at those today, but we'll be also having a look at the other legislation that you need to be kept up to speed with. Okay, this webinar forms part of your continuous improvement process under Standard 2.2. Following this webinar, you should hold a quality and compliance meeting and include in the minutes that you attended this webinar and what did you learn from this webinar. Is there any improvements that you are going to make to your policies and procedures due to attending to this webinar? Or is there anything that you need to implement because you haven't implemented it as yet into your organisation's practices? So you should review the policies and procedures against each of these standards as part of your process. So you should have a look at your Q&C manual and review the standards for each of those policies and procedures. Once you've reviewed those, update your minutes and put it in your minutes that you had updated your policies and procedures as well. There are a range of documentation that will be in line with these standards that we're having a look at. Some of the things that we're going to be looking at for transition from superseded training products is that assessment validation will be part of that process when you're looking at transitioning. So there's different forms of documentation that will relate, and I'll pull up different documents today. Okay, thank you very much for attending today. All right, first we'll start with transition of training products. So standard 1.26 and 1.27 is that it's a standard that's put into place or clause to ensure that you are only delivering training to current qualifications that are on your scope of registration. So that means if you go on to training.gov.au and whatever quals that are on your scope on training.gov.au for your RTO, they're the ones you're allowed to deliver. Anything that's not on there, you're not allowed to deliver. But what happens is training packages will change. It's about every 3 years that a training package will change. And I'm going to give you an example today of a training package that's changed and how you would map it to do your transition. So we're going to be having a look at that today. But what ASPA want to ensure is that when they're auditing you, that you're not delivering qualifications that aren't on your scope of registration. Now, a standard transition is 12 months from when the new qualification comes out. You'll have the old one on your scope of registration until the new one is superseded. So you've got a 12-month transition. But there's a special condition in it at the moment. We're going to talk about that today as well. But where the qualification is no longer on your scope, that's when you can no longer deliver it or issue any certificates for that qualification. So the big thing about transition and teach out is ensuring that we have a process in place for when a qualification is updated. How are you going to go through the process of transitioning your students who are currently enrolled over to the new qual or teach out? So you teach them out on that qualification and then you're enrolled into the new qualification. Okay, so that's basically standard 1.26, and that you don't have anybody commence training in a training product that's been removed or deleted from your scope of registration. So 1.27 is that is specified in 1.26, do not apply where a training package requires the delivery of superseded unit or competency. So it might be that you have another qualification on your scope which has a unit of competency from another training package that has been superseded. You're allowed to continue delivering the superseded unit. You don't have to transition to the new unit, although I strongly recommend that you do. Anyway, we'll have a look at some examples of these today. So this clause is in place to ensure that students are transitioned to a new training package within 12 months of the old training product being superseded. This ensures that you are kept up to date and that your students are getting the most relevant and up-to-date qualification with the training and assessment that you're doing. Sorry, Sir John, you can't hear me. Can you hear me now, Sir John? I have everybody else can hear me, but Sir John can't hear me. So I'll just get you to answer that. The RTO should have a clear process in place to ensure that either that they either complete the training and assessment for students currently enrolled. Yep, you're good. Okay, cool. Within a 1 year period, and has a transition of the student to the new qualification if the student does not complete with the 1 year of the teach out. New students are not enrolled into training products that have been removed or deleted from your RTO scope of registration. So if it's still on your scope, it's still current. It may be superseded, but it's still current on your scope of registration. So I'm going to have a look at that. So at the moment, we'll have a look at that next, but at the moment, ASQA have an update on their website that came out in March, as of March start this year. It also came out last year as well. They've extended transition to teach out by 6 months. So qualifications within training packages that were endorsed between 1 September 2015 and 31 March 2016 have been given an extra 6 months beyond the regular 12-month transition period. So you've actually got 18 months transition to teach out. So RTOs are required to either complete or transfer the students before the superseded training products are removed from their scope of registration. So that's where it's important that you need to actually have a look on your scope and actually see if it's current on your scope. This allowance was for the delivery of full qualifications only, not for skill sets, not for individual units. If you have an individual unit or a skill set on your scope that's been superseded, that's it. You can't teach it straight away. You've got to take it off your scope and you've got to put the new one on. Sometimes there are direct equivalents, so you will get the new one put directly straight back onto your scope. If there are not direct equivalents, so for example, the Cert 4 Training and Assessment, TAE, is not a direct equivalent, and it's got a requirement that you need to add that to your scope. You'll have to go through the process of an addition to scope. So we're going to have a look at that today. This is I've taken this extract from ASQA News on the ASQA website. That's the hyperlink there if you wanted to check it out. You can actually, I'm just trying to think, I think I can click on that. I'm just going to put that hyperlink in there for you in the chat section, so you can check it out if you wanted to. If you want to have a look at that, if you think you might have a qualification in your scope that's been superseded, check out that link. Okay, so currently these training packages are under transition as at the 29th of March. So the Business Services Training Package, BSB 07, I think there's a 16 now. CHC08, they have qualifications that are on there. So there's replacement items that were released in these months. And the superseded quals will be removed from your scope. So if you've got business quals on your scope, for example, and there was any units or the qualification changed on the 14th of January, anywhere after the 14th of January 2016, you have until the 13th of July 2017 this year to add the new qual to your scope. So you'll need to actually have a look at your scope of registration and actually see if it's on there. Now, if you're a new initial registration, you don't need to worry about this because we haven't actually got it on your scope yet, but it will be relevant once you are an RTO and you will have access to this webinar following. And it's a good idea to have an understanding of what transition to teach out is before you actually have to do it. Okay, so we've got the health services package. So there's a few packages here. So they have new quals put on their scope, and you've got till this superseded quals will be removed off your scope to add them to your scope. So I'm just going to go switch to my screen now so that I can actually show you what I mean. Now, I'm just trying to see, I don't know where my training.gov one is gone. Don't want that one. Don't want that one. Nope. Okay, I had one there ready to go, but I've actually lost it. So actually this is mostly good because I'll be able to show you what to do. Okay. Hold on. Let's move that over to the screen. Okay, sorry about that, guys. All right, I'm going to show you my screen now. So what I'm doing is I'm going to training.gov.au, and this is where you can check out what quals are on your scope, what's currently on your scope, and you can also check out, so you can look up your RTO in here and have a look at what quals are on your scope. I'm actually looking at, this is a client that I've worked with recently. I'm not actually going to bring up the client, but I'm going to bring up the qualification that we had a look at. This is one that's on their scope. So it's a project management one, which has been superseded on their scope. So they currently have this Diploma of Project Management on their scope. So it actually says it's on there, but as you can see here, it's superseded. This is one of the qualifications that has a 18-month teach-out period. So they've got until October, I think it was. So it's superseded the new qual. So where you can have a look is you go to the new qual. Okay, so the new one is Project Management, Diploma of Project Management 15 is a training package. So that was released on the 25th of March 2015. That's not the one I was thinking about, because there is actually another one. I'm sure there's another one there. I think they actually brought it under another training package as well, this one. But I'll show you, so where it's superseded here. So they've got the old qual on the scope, and you'll see it's got the old unit and the old qualification outline and what the background is and things like that on there. So it actually has what the core units, you can have a look at all the qualification, but it's superseded. So in order to put this on your scope, it actually says here, it was updated to meet the standards for training packages. And then the one before that, the qualification structure revised to reflect broader application within a range of project management roles and context. I know which one. I know which one. It wasn't project management, it was event management. Sorry about that, guys. I'll use this as an example because it was a very good example of how the training package changed, and they still have it on their scope. So they have this old one, Diploma of Project Event Management, and you can see here, you can see that it's a THT unit, and then it's changed to a SIT qualification. So it was THT, and then it moved over to SIT. So you can see SIT 50316. So they've got this 03 one still on their scope. So you can see here, was it 03? No, it wasn't that one. I'm just trying to see which one it was superseded by. Here it was. This is the one that was superseded. So this Diploma of Events was the old one, and it's superseded on the 2nd of March 2016. So you can see it here. It'll tell you what's changed in the superseded qual. So I actually tell you that it's been superseded. It says here that it's not equivalent. There's some new units, brand new units in there. So coordinate on-site event registrations, manage on-site event operations added to core, increasing the core by 2 units and decreasing electives by 2 units. Non-equivalence based on redesign of qualification and addition of units to scope. So that means they've already got this on their scope, but because it's not a direct equivalent, they actually have to add the new qualification to their scope and transition the students from this qualification to the new qualification. So you have a look, you can actually see that's the new one there. This is the old one. So you can go through and you can have a look at it. But what you can also do, we'll go to the new one now. You can actually compare the content of this qualification with other releases of training components. This is how you get to see what are the differences between the different, the old qualification and the new qualification. So we know we want to have a look at the new one against the last one that they had, which was the 12. They had SIT 50212 on their scope. So we're going to compare it. And you'll see in here that you can see what changes have been made. So everything, so if you have a look at this, text that is in SIT 50212 release 2 and not in SIT 50316 release 1 is shown like this. So it's in red and crossed out. So that means it's not in the new package. Text that is in 50316 release 1 and not in SIT 50212 release 2 will be shown like this. It will be in black. So now it's not applicable. So the modification history is not applicable in this one. This is where we're going to see the most difference. Most of it you're not going to see much at all. It's pretty much going to be the same. Information, pathway is going to be the same. But what's going to change is the packaging rules, which is, so this one was, they've got 2 new cores. So coordinate on-site event registrations. No, I think that one just changed. So manage site event operations and enhance customer service operations. So they're being added to the scope. And then there's been slight changes in the wording for some of the units as well. So this is how you actually tell what is the difference between the old training package and the new training package. So it'll tell you what the new units are. It'll tell you what the differences are. Sometimes it's just a matter of the code. So see here, this one here, the name is still the same. Make a presentation is still the same, but the code's changed. So that's the only change that's happened here. Customer service. So it was BSBCMM401A. It's now BSBCMM401. One of the major changes that have happened in training packages of the last year is they've taken away the A, B, C, D, all of those. It's now just 001, 002, 003, and they don't actually have an ABC anymore. There'll be a version number or something like that. When it's just a change of code, that's generally a direct equivalent. It's just the code's different. That's all you've got to do. When they actually change the name of the unit, that means they've actually, there is no direct equivalent. They've actually changed the unit. As a rule of thumb, that's how you can follow that to see if there's a direct equivalent or not. The only way you're going to really find out whether they're a direct equivalent or not is to actually break it down into each unit, actually go back through each unit and have a look at each unit. So you can actually go and have a look at what the cores are in here, break down the core and see what the difference is. But that modification history is the best way to actually check out what are the differences between the old training package and the new training package. Another way you can work out what the differences are is to go to the Service Skills Organisation and actually ask them what are the changes in the training package, and they should be able to give you an update as well, and there should be in the companion guide. So you'll see, you can look up the companion guide for the qualification. Let's see if this one's got one. Yep, this one's got one. So here's the companion guide here. So you'll see here, you can click on the companion guide and it will tell you what so this one was released in March last year. So the great thing about downloading the companion guides is you can actually have a look at, it'll actually help you write your TAS for the qualification. It'll also give you that really good information that you need to know about maybe work placement or assessment conditions or resources that you need for your assessments. It really complements the qualification when you're looking at it on training.gov.au, because you can actually break down the qualification even further. I'm not going to go into great detail on this, but I certainly recommend when you're doing an upgrade of a qualification that you also have a look at the companion guide. And particularly if you're writing a training and assessment strategy, you'll also look at the companion guide because it'll give you lots of information that you won't get out of the qualification or the unit of competency on training.gov.au. So that's how you basically have a look at what is superseded and what's not. So we had one back there. So that was the superseded one. So we've got that superseded qual there. So you might look up your RTO and you'll see, so here you can see, I'm just doing random RTOs here. So we can see here that they might have the old, so let's see if we've got diploma of events. They'll have the old qual on their scope. So it'll be interesting to see if they've got the new one on their scope. Yep, so they've still got the old one on their scope. So there's diploma of events and they've got the new one. So they've put the new one on. So they must have transition to teach out happening there. So they're, and what transition to teach out is, they've already got students enrolled in the diploma of events. They need to finish them off. They've got another 5 months to go to get them transition. So they'll either complete the training within the next 5 months, or they transition them over. They've got the new one on their scope now, so they can transition them over to the new qualification on their scope. So you can do one or the other. I personally, it depends on how far along you are, the students are in the course. If they've got the majority of the units, so this one, the only change was 2 new core units. So basically, if they were almost finished the qualification, you just teach them the 2 new core units, and then they've got the new qual. I know personally, if it was me being a student, I want the latest qual. I don't want the old qual. So it's better marketing if you do upgrade them to the new qual. So it's up to you how you want to do it. You can either teach them out, get them finished in the old qual. So this example was diploma of events, or you can transition them over to the new qual and then teach them out in the new qual. So that's basically what transition and teach out means. Now, I'm hoping everybody's caught on with what I'm saying there. If you have any questions about that, let me know. I'm hoping that was clear. It is a very difficult one. We've actually since learned that I had it in my head that you couldn't actually, if it was superseded, you couldn't actually teach it anymore, but that's incorrect. You can. As long as it's still on your scope of registration on training.gov.au, you can continue teaching it. But you need to be aware that there has been a change to the training package, because you'll need to either transition or teach them out over to the new qual. Now, the best way to do that is to register on training.gov.au to get updates for that qualification. So you just click, I do this in my workshop, so you would have seen it. If you've been to my RTO compliance workshop, there's actually instructions in your booklet that shows you how to register on training.gov.au to get updates, regular updates. But basically you just click on the notify me of changes on training.gov.au and you can get updates regularly of whenever that training package change. And that is part of our policies and procedures, is that you will register for an update for that qualification. So whenever it's updated on TGA, you will be notified of that change. So if there's a new qualification comes out, you'll get that notification. You'll still have 12 months for transition and teach out. Then what you are required to do is either transition the students to the new qual, or you teach them out in the current qual. So that's basically what transition and teach out is. This is our procedure for transitioning. So when you look at your Q&C manual, you'll see this policy and procedure in there. But basically what you need to do is map. So what I just did then, I just showed you how to map. So map the old training product to the new training product. So you can just compare it. So you go onto training.gov.au and you compare it, the old qual with the new qual. You see what the differences are. Identify, so if it's just a change of code in the unit code, all you're doing on your assessment tools is changing the code. That's it. You're not doing anything else. If there's been a change in the unit, it might be a substantial change or it might be a minor change. You need to actually have a look at that unit to identify, and you need to look at the performance criteria, the assessment conditions, to actually identify how big a change it is. Some examples of changes can be things like, instead of soil, they use the word dirt. So it could be just the change of a word. Another example I could use is, instead of soil, now they have heavy rocks. That's going to be a major difference to that unit of competency, because the heavy rocks are going to have different assessment conditions, different performance criteria, because it's a different weight of material that you're using, things like that. Whereas soil to dirt is just a terminology. They just change their terminology. It's like occupational health and safety to workplace health and safety. It's just a word that changed. There wasn't any other major changes other than that in most units of competencies on training.gov.au. When we had that changeover from OHS to WHS, it was just a change of the word, and that was it. And there was no changes you had to do to the assessment tools except for change OHS to WHS, and that was it. So sometimes it can be really simple like that, and then other times it can be a lot more complicated. It might be a whole new unit that you need to put in place. So you should review all your training and assessment systems. The best way to do that is to do assessment validation, or at least schedule assessment validation within the next 12 months of some of the units. So maybe do it in the order that you are delivering the units. Validate the units, or the units that have changed. Validate them one first. So you should do an assessment validation schedule, identify what that is, and then validate your assessment tool. The best way to identify what the changes are in the training package is to do assessment validation, and you validate the old assessment tool with the new unit of competency. And you look at the new performance criteria, the new assessment conditions. You'll need the old one, your old mapping tool and things like that, but the best way is to have a look at your old assessment tool against the new performance criteria and assessment conditions, and then update it from there. That's the best way to do it. You should update your training and assessment strategy as well. So that's one of the first things you should do. So if it's a change, so that example for event management is that you would add those 2 core units and remove the elective units. So you would put those in. So that would be how you change your TAS. And it might be that your TAS needs to change because there'll be a different way of delivering it. It might be that the 2 new units that went in might be able to be clustered with some other units or assessments that you've got. So you might want to do that. So it might be having a look at looking at your delivery schedule as well, and see if you need to change your delivery schedule. You should, if required, if it's not a direct equivalent, you'll need to do a change of scope of application through ASQUAnet. So you could go onto ASQUAnet and do an addition of scope through there where you add the new qualification on your scope. The old one will just come off. So you don't need to remove it from your scope of registration. It'll just come off automatically once the new one comes on. Not once it comes on, once the superseded transition period has closed off. So, for example, that event management one, it still has an 18-month transition period. So it'll close off in the next 5 months. So it'll just come off that RTO scope of registration. Okay. All right. So once the new training product has been added to your scope of registration, the courses can then be scheduled. So the new qual can be scheduled on your training schedule, and then you can start marketing it. You have to have the new qual on your scope first before you can start marketing the new qual. You can't start marketing it with the intention of we're adding it to our scope, because that's false advertising. You can only advertise what's currently on your scope of registration. You can tell your students that you are adding the new qual to your scope and that your intention is to transition them across to the new qualification, but you can't guarantee them that you will, because you can't guarantee that you will get it added to your scope of registration. So it's really important that you add that qualification as soon as possible to your scope of registration. Now, in majority of cases, an addition to scope, other than your high-risk ones like childcare and aged care and things like that, majority of cases, it's just rewrite your training and assessor strategy. It's a new delivery plan, staff matrix that maps to the performance criteria of the units or competencies that are being added with the qualification. You don't need any assessment tools. So you can do your addition to scope before you actually finish upgrading your assessment tools. I recommend you get started with it, with your assessment tools, but you don't have to wait until you've updated all your assessment tools before you do the addition to scope. The only risk that you may have is if you add it to your scope and you haven't updated your assessment tools yet, is you might end up going to site audit. In particular, if you're up for your post-initial or your re-registration, or you've done another addition to scope that may trigger an audit and you have a site audit, then you have to have all of your assessment tools in place when you go to audit. So just be prepared for that. Manage your risk. Don't do an addition to scope if you know it's going to take you a long time to fix those assessment tools. If it's something quick and easy, then yeah, of course, do the addition to scope. You've got to manage your risk. That's all with RTO work. There's a lot of what we do, managing your risk. And when you're putting new quals, you want to go to site audit or not. Something like an event management, it's not high risk, so it's pretty easy to add on. Okay, I don't know. Is everybody still hearing and seeing me all right? I just had an error message come up. Yes? Oh, cool. Cool. Okay. Oh, good. All right. Okay. It's just my internet, I think. We're going to be moving soon. This is the very exciting news. We're going to be moving our office soon, and we're going to have NBN, which will be brilliant. So I won't have so many of these issues when we get NBN. So we're going to be moving. It'll be in the next month and a half, 2 months that we're moving. We're just securing the venue and things like that. So our whole office is going to be moving. We'll have NBN, or will be a better service for everybody there. So anyway, that's the good news. So once you've added the new qual to your scope, ensure that you've got all your training and assessment materials in place. Make sure your marketing materials being updated, that your statements of attainment and your qualifications on your database have been updated with the correct codes and titles. You should make sure that you update your training and assessor strategy and disseminate it between your staff members, so particularly your trainers and assessors, so that they can see what's changed. Very important that you also get your trainers and assessors involved with the transition. Get some feedback from them about the new units or whatever's changed in the qualification. You should be getting their feedback. So during the 12-month transition period, the CEO is responsible for reviewing and updating the existing students with where they're up to, so that they will have a time frame to complete. And you can do that. It should be in writing, so you should give them a letter or an email. You can send them an email just stating that you are doing transition to teacher. If it is, you're going to be finished within the time frame, plenty of time anyway, you don't need to notify them. But if there is a risk that you may need to transition them over to the new qual, then you should notify them of that. Particularly if you're getting close to the end of the 12-month mark, you should be notifying them and getting ready to transition over if required. Learners who have completed, before you if you are going to transition a student to the new qual, you need to issue them with a statement of attainment with the units that they've completed from the old qual before you transition them over, because they'll just get credit transferred. But they should get a statement of attainment that says they've finished all these units, and all the direct equivalents you'll transfer over to the new qualification when you transfer them into the new qual. So it's up to you. It's totally up to you what you want to do, whether you want to transition over the new qual or just complete them in the old qual and then commence new enrollments in the new qual. So it's totally up to you what you want to do when you do that and what your process is going to be. Okay, if your student hasn't finished their qualification within that 12-month period, you should still issue them with a certificate. And that's anybody. If you have a student that drops out of a course, you should also always issue them with a statement of attainment with the units they have completed. It is actually a requirement. As long as they've paid all their fees. If they've paid all their fees and they're up to speed with all their fees, then you should issue them with a certificate of whatever units that they've completed. If the learner has not completed within 12 months, learners should be transferred over to the new training product. All learners will have completed and been issued with a certification within 2 years. So that's one of the requirements of the standards, is that you must issue a certificate within 2 years. So that can be statement of attainment or it could be the full qual. Learners have been issued with a certificate within 1 year for skill sets, units and things like that. The CEO is required to advise all current participants and employers, if relevant, about the revised units and the requirement to complete the studies within the transition period. So what we were doing with this example RTO that I have here, who are doing Diploma of Event Management, we're going to put the new qual on the scope. There's only 2 units that have changed. So basically what they're going to do is they're going to transition all the students over to the new qual and offer them the new qual for free. They're not going to charge any more with the 2 new units on it. So it just depends on your organisation how you want to do it. You can charge more if you want to do that. Depends on, you've got a cost analysis as well. If it's going to cost you money, then you should charge money to upgrade them over to the new qual. But it's up to you how you do that. Okay, so this is just an example of if you have a student who's currently enrolled, there's a change in the training package, and I don't know whether I can draw on this. I think I can. No, I don't think I can. I was going to see if I could draw. I can't draw. Okay. So you might have a student who's currently enrolled. They've done 3 months of the course. The training package changes. You've got then 12 months to transition them over to the new qual or teach them out. So that's basically what that means, transition and teach out. Okay. Any questions about transition and teach out? Did I explain that well? I hope so. So I'm not getting any questions, so I'm hoping that you've all got that and you all understand what transition to teach out is. But that's basically a snapshot how you do it, but refer to the Q&C manual for the process. So if you get a qualification or a unit that changes on your scope of registration, go to the Q&C manual and look at standards 1.26 and 1.27 for the policy and procedure on transitioning. And then you can always rewatch this video as well. That's something else you could do. Okay, now we're moving on to standards 8.5 and 8.6. So standards 8.5 and 8.6 is all about, you don't only have to comply with the standards for RTOs, you need to comply with all the other relevant legislation that's relevant to your students. So that includes your industrial relations, work cover, WHS, so that's all your standard stuff when you have employees and students on site. But it can also include standards and legislation that is relevant to your industry. So you need to keep up to date and have policies and procedures in place that are relevant to your industry. So if you have very industry-specific legislation for your industry, you need to make sure that that's in your policies and procedures manual as well. In our Q&C manual, we have a range of legislation in there already. So I'm just going to pull up the manual now. It's not really, there we go. Where we've got our legislation in there. So I'm just going to bring it up now so you can have a look. So I've got the Q&C manual here that you're going to have a look at. So we've got comply with all relevant legal requirements. So in here, we've actually got a policy and procedure. This is how you're going to make sure that you keep your policies and procedures up to date and that you have regular updates about any changes in legislation sent to you so that you know what the changes are, but also how you're going to make sure that your policies and procedures are updated due to that information that you're receiving. So one of the policies and procedures that we have is that you will register on training, register to get updates. So that's actually just all the standard legislation. That's that one there. So it's in standard 8.5, it's that you will comply with all the relevant Commonwealth, state and statutory legislation, territory legislation, and that you'll keep update. So these are just standard ones that we've got in here. We've got a whole heap. So we've got how you'll comply with the standards for RTOs, MVR, Australian Qualification Framework. We've got a whole heap of those ones. But then we also go into privacy, and we've got a whole heap of WHS. So we've got a whole heap of policies and procedures on there, and even how to do reports and things like that. We've got anti-discrimination, sexual harassment, the Harassment Act, anti-bullying. So there's a whole heap of standards that we've got legislation that we've got in there that you should be kept up to date with. Now, the good thing is because you are members, we are keeping these up to date for you. That's what we do. So we keep all of these policies and procedures up to date, and we get regular updates of when these legislation changes, and when that changes, we update the policies and procedures in the manual. If you don't continue to be a member, you'll need to do this yourself and make sure that you keep up to date. Now, how we do it and how we put it in our policies and procedures, how you'll maintain you're keeping up to date with the changes in legislation, is that you'll actually register to get information from, what we've got here is we've actually got the Federal Register of Legislation website. So there's actually a website where you can go to where you can actually look up all of the different legislation. So you could just say, we can look up for the standards for registered training organisations, and it'll do a search. I must have typed something wrong. Registered training organisations, why aren't you coming up? I don't know whether it's going to ask for a specific, there we go, it was there. Okay, so you can look up the standards, and this is the current standards for the standards for registered training organisations. Now, I've actually registered on this account, so I've got my account here, and these are all standards that I've got, or legislation that I've registered for updates. So whenever there's a change to the standards for RTOs, I'll get an update. Whenever there's a change to WHS, I'll get an email, basically, an email that'll come out to me that'll tell me that there's been a change in legislation. So you can all register for this. It doesn't cost anything to do this. You just register on the Federal Register of Legislation. I'm just going to send you over a link for that now in the chat box. So you can look that up yourself, but I recommend you get on there and register for updates for all of these standards. We register for these and we get updates when they have changed so that we can update our policies and procedures. So I've got ones on privacy, on the MVR, copyright, DPR, WHS. I haven't put all the anti-discrimination ones and things like that in there yet. I had to set up a new account today because my old one wouldn't work. So so that's something else you need to check, is to make sure that your account is actually working. So that's how we keep up to date, is we actually register to get these updates. So you can do it on ComLaw as well. I'm going to just put this one in, but you can do it on comlaw.gov.au. You can get updates on there. But this one, legislation.gov.au, is a good one as well to get updates. So whenever there is a change in legislation, you then review your policy and procedure and update your policies and procedures to reflect the changes in the legislation. And that's basically it. That's basically, when you're looking at keeping up to date with legislation, that's what you need to do. You need to make sure that you keep ahead of it. Like, as I said, we do that for you. When you're a member with Vivacity, we get all these updates for you, and we review the policies and procedures on a regular basis with getting these updates. So this is what we do. We put it in place. So the RTO is required to have policies and procedures in place against all this other legislation, and your staff and trainers need to have access to these policies and procedures so they have a good understanding of what their rights and responsibilities are, and so that they ensure that their students are also kept up to date with the latest legislation requirements as well. And it should be a clear process for keeping staff and students informed of any changes in legislation. So key legislation that you need to be aware of is the Vet Quality Framework, privacy protection, WHS, child protection, working with children checks. So it depends on what you have on your scope, whether you need to keep up to date with these. But we, as I said, we already have them in our policies and procedures manual. That's it. So that's it for today. Does anybody have any questions? I finished a bit early today. Has anybody have any questions about legislation, keeping up to date, about transitioning from superseded training products, or open it up to anything else? You have a question about anything that you'd like to throw out there, I'm happy to answer it for you. I've got a quiet group today, not very much happening. But if you have any questions whatsoever, I'm happy to answer that question for you. Just throw it in the chat box. Does it look like? Don't have any. I'm getting thank yous, which is good. Thank you. Thank you very much for attending today. If we don't have any questions, we'll move on. Have a great rest of the day. Go chill for the rest of the day. It was a nice end of the day now. And have a great month of May. You should enjoy your month of May. Slowly moving into winter. I don't mind this time of the year because we can change into our warmer clothes, which is great. We're not so hot. Anyway, have a great month, guys, and I'll see you next month. I'll just have a look at what we're doing next month. So next month is standard 2.1, 2.2, and DPR 6.1. So 2.1 and 2.2 is complying with the legislation and implementing a continuous improvement approach throughout your organisation. The key one that we do is we have the monthly meetings, the Q&C meetings. Attending these webinars is how you comply with standard 2.2, and continually updating your policies and procedures, but also holding your meetings every month and then minuting those meetings. DPR 6.1 is about your, what are we getting ready for? Not event miss reporting, quality indicator reporting. So we've got different data requirements where you'll be needing to submit reports. So that's what we'll be talking about next month. So have a great month. I'll catch you later. Thanks. Yep. Thank you. Thank you, guys. I'll give you a quick call, Sir John, after this webinar. Thanks. Bye.